Okay, everyone. I wanted to go over this little activity that I usually assign my English 100 students at the beginning of the semester. This isn't a quiz or anything, so I want you to relax when you do this. It won't be graded or anything like that. It's just a way for me to see how much you understand about the sentence, okay? And to see how much knowledge that you have about the sentence, because obviously in English 100 freshman composition, the primary genre that we're writing in is the academic essay. And we can think of the essay as broken down into paragraphs. And, we'll talk about what paragraphs are and how they work and how they function and what makes a successful paragraph. But the basic unit of the paragraph is the sentence. And for those of you who have a lot of anxiety about your writing, in particular your grammar, right, it's always good to start with the sentence, your basic understanding of the sentence. Now, a good working definition of a sentence, if we were in class, I would ask you and you would respond, raise your hands, and usually, we'd get it right. What I'd usually ask students things like, what is a definition of a sentence? Okay, and students would say something like a subject and a verb, right? A sentence needs a subject and a verb, which is correct. But there's also one other component that we need to have a sentence. So one of the questions that I would ask you as a follow-up is, okay, in order to have a sentence, there needs to be three criteria for us to have a sentence. A subject, so a sentence has to be about someone or something. That's the subject of a sentence. Somebody asks you, what's the subject of the sentence? So what is this sentence about? Who's doing something? Um, who's being described or what is being described? Okay. The next component is, I don't want you to think of it as the verb. Okay. More accurately, I'd like you to think of it as, and you probably heard this term, the predicate. And the predicate, all the predicate does is it tells us what the subject is doing or is describing the subject. Okay. So think of the predicate as, the sort of the action in the sentence. Okay, so we have the subject and the predicate. Now, most people would think we just stop there. All you need to have a sentence is a subject and a predicate, but that's not entirely accurate. The third component that you need to have a sentence is that your sentence, the subject and the predicate, has to be a complete thought. And let me give you an example of this. Imagine that you had written a sentence as he tried, okay? And let's imagine that you were taught that all you needed to have a sentence was a subject and a predicate. And you'd be able to say, as he tried is a sentence, right? I mean, there's a subject, he, predicate, tried, describing what he's doing. But it wouldn't satisfy the third criteria, which is a complete thought. In fact, that non-sentence, as he tried, even to your own ears, should sound like a sort of cliffhanger type phrase, right? As he tried, and then you need more information to complete the thought. So that wouldn't be a sentence. Now, all non-sentences, things that do not satisfy the subject, predicate, complete thought criteria, those could be broken down into categories. They're either phrases, they're either clauses, or sometimes they're just a single word, okay? But for now, we're only concentrating on sentences, writing sentences. Now, the best way for me to teach students how to write sentences, or at least to refresh your memory about sentences, is to start with this comma exercise. And that's what this video is about, okay? So the first thing I'd like you to do, maybe before you even watch this video, right, is to go ahead and do this comma exercise. Put the comma or commas where you think they belong in the following 10 sentences, okay? All right? So I might even ask you to go ahead and do that now, Okay, and I'm going to pause this video. Okay, I'm back. Hopefully you've done that. Okay. Now, of course, I don't know if I do have to say this, but maybe I do, because this is all about your own learning. You don't want to go online and sort of cheat with this, okay? Right? You want to what this is you taking inventory of what you know about sentences and starting with this idea of the comma. Where do commas go? Because learning how to use the comma is really learning how to separate sentences from non-sentences or putting two sentences together. Okay? All right, so let's go over this, okay? Let's go over some of the answers, and then I'm going to go over some of the rules, and hopefully this is helpful to you, okay? All right, so we look at number one. If my cat kills one more bird, I'm going to confine her to the house. And even the way I said that, you could probably guess by ear where the comma goes. And it goes after, right, this word bird here, okay? So I go ahead and put the comma after the word bird. Now, what I'd like you to do now is, if you can, put your finger right over that first part of the sentence. If my cat kills one more bird. Now, if you were to read the second part of that sentence, I'm going to confine her to the house. You ask yourself, that second part of the sentence, I am going to confine her to the house, is that a sentence? Does it meet the three criteria? Does it have a subject, predicate, complete thought? Well, let's see. I am going to confine her to the house. Does it have a subject? I, right? What is this person going to do? What is this I going to do? He's going to confine her to the house. Okay? Has a predicate and actually has a complete thought. We don't know who I is, okay? But that's not important. Okay? What's important is that we know that has a subject, predicate, complete thought. So second part of this sentence is a bona fide legal sentence. But let's try that test on the first part of the sentence. If my cat kills one more bird. What if that's all you had and ended with a period? If my cat kills one more bird, you'd be waiting and waiting, right, for additional information to complete the thought. If that happens, then you know this is a non-sentence, okay? And in this case, this non-sentence is a clause, and this is what we call a subordinate clause, right? You don't necessarily need to know, you know, all the technical jargon. You just have to know that this is a clause, okay? And it's a non-sentence. This clause is a non-sentence. And in order legally for a clause or a non-sentence to be involved with a sentence, right, it needs to hook up with a real sentence. And the way you do that is you need to separate the clause out with a comma, okay? All right, so if my cat kills one more bird, comma, I'm going to confine her to the house. Now, one thing I should say here is there's two ways to write this sentence, right? You could also have written the sentence, I'm going to confine her to the house if my cat kills one more bird. In that example, if the clause comes after the sentence, the real sentence here, then the comma goes away, okay? But if it comes first, right, the clause has to be separated out with the comma, okay? And there's a variety of reasons why most writers choose to write it the way that you see it on the screen, all right? It sort of builds a sort of nice cause and effect, thing to it, right? Tension. If my cat kills one more bird, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? I'm going to confine her to the house, okay? All right, so the rule for that, and that's at the bottom, right? I've listed all the comma rules here, is that subordinate clause, right? We separate out clauses from sentences, especially if that clause comes before the main sentence, okay? Let's look at number two. Number two, everyone should probably recognize, and hopefully, got this correct. My 18-year-old brother's dream was an apartment of his own, comma, a new car with racing stripes, comma, and it should say, and a beautiful girlfriend with a great job, okay? So we put two commas there because what's the rule here? This is a list, okay? And a list is any three items, okay? The one thing I want to say about this, most students get this correct. There are the occasional student who leaves out that last comma after racing stripes, but we do put in that last comma before the last item on the list, followed by the word and And you may have referred to this as, or you may have heard people refer to this as the quote-unquote Oxford comma. And in academic writing, the Oxford comma is required, okay? Now, you may encounter some type of writing that leaves out that last comma, right, in a list, since it's implied, right, that this is the last item. But that is usually a stylistic choice that whatever publication you're reading, could be a novel, right, the editors have decided. But for academic writing, in general rule of thumb, you always put the comma before the last item on the list, followed by the word and. Okay? All right, number three. The grocery store closed at 9, so I had to look for bread at the mini mart. A lot of students would write this sentence and would feel that they've written a pretty, grammatically correct sentence. And the truth of the matter is that it looks, and even the way I read it, it sounds grammatically correct. And for the most part it is, but it's missing something. And what it's missing is it's missing that comma after the word 9. Okay? Now, this is a unique situation because what we really have here, if you read this sentence, and I'm going to read this sentence taking out one word so that you can hear what's really going on. The grocery store closed at 9. I had to look for bread at the mini mart. This one sentence could easily be in two very short, simple declarative sentences. Okay, the grocery store closed at 9. I had to look for bread at the mini mart. And, you're going through K through 12th grade, right, up until maybe the 6th or 7th grade, you're writing sentences, short sentences like that, right? But then all of a sudden, you're encouraged, or you should have been encouraged, right, by your instructor to, write larger sentences, combine two sentences. Well, how can you combine two sentences? Well, there's several options, but probably, the biggest option, right, is in this example, number 3. The grocery store closed at 9, comma, so I had to look for bread at the mini mart. What we have here is a cause and effect situation, right? Why did this person have to go look for bread at the mini mart? Because the grocery store closed at 9. So these two sentences, these small little sentences, actually have a relationship in which they can be combined into one sentence. Okay? But in order to do that, and you have to be very careful about this, is you have to put a comma and you have to use one, and you may have heard of this acronym, the fanboys. The fanboys. Okay? What are the fanboys? Let's do a little bit of review. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And that last one is what we have here. So that's the formula for connecting two small sentences that have a clear relationship to each other, that can be combined into one large sentence, okay? And this is what we call a coordinating conjunction. If subordination means putting one lesser thing with one sort of, superior thing, right? That's what subordination is. A non-sentence, which is lesser than a real sentence, but we can put them together. Really, the non-sentence really depends on the, legitimate sentence in order to be part of that sentence, right? What we have here is two equal sentences, right, that can be combined, can be coordinated. Coordination means putting two equal things together. But in order to do that, you need to use a conjunction, and the conjunction is, the formula for this coordinating conjunction is a comma and the appropriate fanboy. Okay, you have to decide what is the appropriate fanboy. Is it going to be for? Is it going to be and? Is it going to be nor? Is it going to be but, or, yet, or so? In this case, so works well here. Okay? All right, let's look at number 4. You, Mr. Gimbel, are the lucky winner of a ballpoint pen. So you should have 2 commas here, one after you and after Mr. Gimbel. And this makes sense. And this is one that students often get correct. I mean, most students get correct. It just seems natural. But it's also important to understand what's really going on here. If I asked you, what's the main sentence here? What's the main information in the sentence? You are the lucky winner of a ballpoint pen. Okay? But imagine if I walked into class and I yelled that out, you are the lucky winner of a ballpoint pen. All of you would turn and look at each other and say, well, which one of us, right? So you need to single out the person you're addressing, and that's the rule here. This